Hi guys, thanks so much for joining us here today. My name's Michelle and I work with Global Inheritance. We're really excited to be hosting a live webinar for Movie Club. As you know, Movie Club is about creating connections in a disconnected world through our shared love of sitting on the couch and learning new things at the same time. So this week, we recommended the following films: The Ivory Game, Cowspiracy, and Racing Extinction. And today we're lucky enough to have Kate Oshman with us here to discuss The Ivory Game and how the global ivory trade impacts elephants and stuff like that. So I'm just going to start with a quick introduction to Kate. Kate is, I've known Kate a couple of years now, met her on a project I was working on with Global Inheritance called Saving Nature. And I can tell you, Kate is like the real deal. She totally helped us figure out everything we needed to know about what was going on in the world of animal protection, animal habitat destruction, because she had actually been in it, living in it when we were trying to figure out how to do this program. Kate is she's a conservationist. She's a wildlife photographer, an amazing wildlife photographer. Check out her website. Maybe somebody could put it up in the comments, her link. And she's a South African safari guide, but like not even just a regular safari guide. She's like, actually first when she told me she was studying to be a safari guide, I was like, oh my God, you can't go on safaris. And she's like, no, photo safaris, that's the ticket. So I was like, okay. But then I came to find out that she's taking kids on safaris, which is super cool. So maybe we can also put a link in the chat about the program she's working with now, which is Youth for African Wildlife. I think I got that right. Anyways, it's for 18 to 24, 29-year-olds, I think, that go out in the African bush and learn about conservation, how they can make a difference. And in between all that stuff, she's super busy teaching classes and talking about everything that has to do with making the world a better place and saving our wonderful animals and habitats. And we're super excited to have her here today to talk about The Ivory Game, which I guess we can get right into it. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Kate. And Kate, do you have anything you'd like to add to that introduction?
First of all, thank you for such a tremendous introduction. I should have recorded that so I can play that back for my parents when they were like, what are you doing playing in Africa? And I just want to thank you all so much for inviting me to speak today and having me before at Coachella, and for taking such an interest in our natural world and being such an advocate for bringing relevancy and making environmentalism trendy and cool and conservation cool for the next generations, and really actually helping on the ground at these festivals and so much more. So thank you guys for all of your work, and thank you for including me today to tell and share what I know about elephants so people can learn about them.
Well, thanks again, Kate, for being here. I mean, truly, the stories that you've shared with me personally about sleeping on the ground with the animals out in the savannah, it blows my mind, because I'm such a city kid, and to me, it's just like stuff that movies are made of. And I know that you've made films and you've been involved in lots of different productions, and you've been involved in, on the ground conservation activities. You've seen the film. It was released, I think, 2016, if I'm right. So about 4 years ago. What are your thoughts? Like, what were your impressions of the film? What do you kind of give us your kind of movie critic, from an environmental standpoint, thought on the film?
Okay, so The Ivory Game, I think, it's the only and one of the best films, I think, that kind of encapsulates so many different sides of the elephant poaching crisis and elephant conservation. I mean, it takes you from the human-wildlife conflict on the ground between the farmers and the elephants eating their crops. It takes you into the villages and the communities that are involved in poaching and selling the raw ivory. It takes you into Hong Kong and China and shows you the black markets there, all the undercover work. I think one of the things that the film does really well, actually two things. I think you've got I forget where he's from, but it's the guy Craig Miller in the beginning, who just always looks so sad and so defeated. My heart goes out to him and the work that he does in anti-poaching for Big Life Africa. And he does a really good job showing us who elephants are and making us fall in love with their intelligence and their emotions and their personalities and their family bonds. And so I think that's one side that creates empathy for us. And then the other side of it is we really get, it's very military based, this film. And we like all the undercover work and the anti-poaching work. And we get to see just really how violent this world is, and how violent, how destructive, how undercover, how corrupt it is. It's a black market world. So in terms of the black market trades in the world, there's drugs, arms, sex trafficking, human trafficking, and wildlife trafficking. And wildlife trafficking is the third biggest black market activity in the entire world. And wildlife trafficking funds terrorism. It funds wars. One thing I like to talk about is, you guys remember Boko Haram a number of years ago? So there was this, I think it was in Nigeria, there were 200 girls stolen from a school, and they were taken off. And then over the course of a year, they were married to Boko Haram militants. And the families never saw these girls again, or they saw maybe 17 came back or something like that were found. But for example, Boko Haram deals in ivory. That's one of the white gold. That's one of the money-making materials that fuels their terrorism. And same with ISIS in Mali. And you just find this all over. So yeah, wildlife trafficking is a huge issue, and the film really shows that well, I think, and how dangerous the world is. Okay, there's one other thing I want to say about this. In any type of conservation that you're doing, it's about the people. Like, yes, it's about the animals, but there's also a human cost to this, to the poaching, to the black market activity. And the only way that you can ever help wildlife, you can ever help an environment, is you have to help the people who live in that system, who interact with that wildlife, and you have to help them coexist. And I think for good storytelling, for me, if you're going to be trying to get people to care about animal issues, either you got to do one of two things. Either you talk about the people. It's a story about the people, with the animals is the A story, and the animals is the B story. And that's what I think this film does. It focuses on the people involved in this world, with the animals as kind of the B story. Or the other thing that you can do filmmaking wise is you focus on like one animal, and you show his or her story throughout, the entire film. And then it tugs at your heartstrings as a viewer. So
it's great to have your perspective, because you're both a filmmaker and a conservationist. So it's like kind of a really unique section. Whereas, like, sometimes we have these discussions with, an expert in the field, but they, don't really have the wherewithal to explain the storytelling side of it. Or we have this conversation with the filmmaker, but they made the film, but because it was a sort of a professional assignment, but not a passion project necessarily for them. Although with documentaries, often it really is a passion project. But I thought, I like I was saying earlier to you, I don't think I would have seen this film had it not been sort of put in front of me by the movie club. And had I, you came up in conversation, actually, Kate, the other day, because I saw the film on the list, and I was like, we got to talk to Kate, and then I got excited to see the film, because then I thought, oh, we'll get to talk to you about this. And then you were available, which was great. But it's a subject that's really scary, for a lot of people, or very abstract for a lot of people. Either they really kind of understand what's going on with habitat destruction and poaching and all the things that are happening to animals that are causing extinction, or they really don't, because they're so removed from it, right? And one of the questions that came in that might be a good place to start the discussion is basically what I just said. This person said this question came in. I'll just read it verbatim. This issue feels really remote to me in terms of both location, and Ivory is not something I knowingly ever come across in my day-to-day life. So what are the best ways to educate people across the world to
I think we're having a little bit of a delay here with Michelle.
Sometimes it helps if you turn off your video and then your audio will play normally if you're having bandwidth issues.
Thanks, Jake.
Hi, I didn't even know you were here.
Michelle, are you back or are you still frozen?
Well, I have the question, if I can read it, if that's okay.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, so the question was basically about these issues feel so far away and they don't feel real. And how can I, sitting in the States or wherever you are, make an impact on these issues? And how do I connect with it? It's such a good question. And it's something that, you know, I think about all the time. I'm lucky enough that I've built my life around going to different parts in Africa and working on the front lines and bringing guests over to show them wildlife and to educate them personally. But not everybody has the ability to or wants to change their life in that way. And that's where I think the beauty of social media and filmmaking come in, and just educating, interpersonal education. As small and insignificant as it might sound sometimes, have conversations with the people around you. You know, if you see this film or any other film or read an article that moves you, and whatever issue it is, whether it's elephant poaching or a flood somewhere, you know, it's like there's myriad issues in the world and they all need and deserve attention. And whatever resonates with your heart, like share that with the people that you love. Make the world a more loving, harmonious place, and share your passion and share what gets to you. I know it sounds cheesy, but it's true. Your passion will affect other people. That's one way. Share, you know, and have conversations. Or if somebody says something about like, oh, I saw an elephant, I heard about an elephant the other day, or I read this, and you're like, oh, did you know that one elephant is poached every 15 minutes for its ivory? So, and like by the time that we're done with this, if it's a 30-minute call, that's 2 elephants will be poached by the time we all leave each other's faces on this, which is like an insane thought. And for me, numbers don't really, I don't understand numbers because it does, like, again, that same idea, it doesn't seem necessarily real, which I get, but when you put it, sometimes some people are more scientific than others. I'm more of a storyteller, which is why film resonates with me. Another way to help is, I think one of the biggest things is get involved in your local communities. So if there's an issue that you're passionate about, even if it's something like elephant poaching and it seems so far away from living in Denver, Colorado, or wherever you are, do just a local Google search. See what's around in your community. Maybe there's an animal rescue that you can be a part of. Maybe a big international NGO has an office in that city. Or even just get involved in your local community. Because I always feel like as well, even if you're dealing with, you love animals, help out at your humane society or help out with foster a dog. There's so many different ways to get involved. So again, for me, it comes down to education, sharing information, and also more than anything, finding what really resonates with your heart. And again, this sounds cheesy, I apologize, but for me, it has to do with African wildlife. Like, what? I'm this girl from Maryland. How and why do I love African wildlife? I don't know, but for some reason, my heart is obsessed with it. So I knew that I needed to make a difference and move in that direction. And so for whatever that is for you, go after it and make a difference. Even if it's a hobby, you can't build your life around it. Like, everything we do in the world that helps makes a difference. I mean, we're in this right now. I think for the first time, we're all really realizing how interconnected we are. And as a human ecosystem within our greater ecosystem of the entire world. And we just have to be better, and we have to move in love, and we need to help one another. So, yeah.
Kate, since this film was released in 2016, Have you seen, not just because of this film, but just because of the whole environmental movement, have you seen a lot of progress as far as what is actually being done in the, in the places where there's the biggest problems?
So let's talk about, so for elephant poaching in general, I first want to say there's 3 issues that elephants really suffer from in the wild. There's the poaching, which is mostly in East Africa. It's starting to trickle down a little bit into South Africa, Southern Africa, but it's not as bad. And then you've got human wildlife conflict, which is the bigger issue, and it will continue to be the biggest issue as population increases and habitat is shrinks. And then the other issue is trophy hunting, which obviously doesn't, at this point, doesn't kill off huge numbers of animals, but it's a whole mentality. It's a whole destructive, different type of mentality. And so when this film was released in 2016, the Chinese in China, the legal selling of ivory in stores and trading ivory was still legal. So people could still go to a store in a nice mall and buy a piece of ivory. And in 2015, just rewinding a little bit, between efforts between Barack Obama and President Xi of China, they pledged to close the legal sales in all stores, and the factories that carving factories for ivory pledged to end them in the end of 2017. So December 31st, 2017, they officially closed all of the carving factories and the stores. And it has made a difference in terms of people's perception. So that coupled with education. So you can't just close the stores. It was also different companies like the WWF took great strides to just educate people about ivory and elephant poaching at airports. So when people, for example, there's no more buying of ivory in China, people would fly to other countries and buy illegal ivory and smuggle it back on the plane, or buy legal ivory there, but smuggle it back into China. So I was even reading that some flights between these countries, the hosts would even say on the flights, don't buy ivory, it's illegal. They would make an announcement about ivory during the flights, which I thought was wild and amazing. And I'm sure if like at LAX, you arrive and there's a huge billboards saying no to ivory and tiger skins and things like that. So it's always got to be coupled. There's got to be the legal side of it and the jurisdiction along with the education, and they really go hand in hand. And again, education, that's where we can come in.
That's a great answer. Michelle, are you back online?
I'm back online.
Awesome.
Hopefully for the rest of this conversation, but thanks for helping me out with that internet situation. Kate, really good points there. It broke my heart at the end of the film when they were burning all the tusks, when they were trying to reduce the supply in order to manage the demand on that, or reduce the inventory. And I wondered if that was really the right thing to do or not. But the film certainly opened up a lot of questions, posed a lot of questions. Like one of the questions which I thought about and somebody else asked is this idea of building these fences and preserving a habitat for the elephants. Has that happened? Was that the right way to go? Is that really, can the locals and the elephants coexist? And can we protect the elephants that way? Or are we endangering them more by confining them? There's sort of all these other issues that the film brought up for me as well. I was just wondering your thoughts on that.
I hear that. I so hear all of that. I want to get back to the burning of ivory in the stockpiles later, because I do think that's a really interesting thing to think about. But regarding kind of more the nitty gritty on the ground, coexisting with elephants. So one of the things that I find endlessly fascinating about conservation and the conservation world is it is so massive. I mean, you have what we're doing right now, which is education conservation, and it's spreading awareness. Then you've got the people on the ground who are actually going into the communities and working with the communities to help them cohabitate with elephants and other wildlife. And then of course there's a huge spectrum, so much more of what goes on in conservation. So getting down into the grassroots conservation, there's a couple things that have happened. NGOs on the ground do great work. And so to combat in East Africa, and started to happen in South Africa as well. So Ellies, you can now call them all Ellies, by the way. They're not just elephants. Like if you're in the know, you can call them Ellies. So if I refer to them as that, that's what they are. So Ellies don't like bees. They're these like huge, big creatures, but bees freak them out. And conservationists know this. So they've started to do, basically plant these yellow hives on tops of these platforms, posts all around farmland and where people are, have their agriculture. And so there's going to be bees in like every second or every third of these posts. And so the Ellies at some point, they just start to associate bees with these yellow things so that they stay away, and it keeps them out of the fields. It keeps them from eating people's crops, which is their livelihood. And it also, by having bees, the local communities are able to make wax products and honey, and it also gives them some form of industry. So that is such a great solution, and that's had a lot of success, and it's getting bigger and bigger. Another way is elephants also are very sensitive to spice. So in some communities with agriculture, they have planted like around their main stock of crops, which Ellies would just dig into and love and eat and be happy. They've planted chili peppers. So the Ellies won't go there because they're going to have to get through and sniff through and deal with chili peppers. So that's another really creative way. And it gives also the local communities can make hot sauce and have chili peppers. So you find these incentives to work with people. I did work with an organization in Namibia. Namibia is in the the southwest of Africa. And it's a desert country. It is so beautiful and stunning. I highly recommend going there. And there is this very special group of elephants in the desert that are desert adapted elephants. They can go much longer without drinking water. They can drink a lot less water. Like normally an Ellie has to drink 160 liters of water a day. These ones have learned to drink just 100. They're smaller elephants. They've got squatter tusks. They've got like stumpy legs. They're different. They're the same species, but they're just desert adapted, and they're special. And there's only about 150 of them left. And so Namibia, to give you an idea, is it looks like the moon or Mars. It's just vast. And it is the least densely populated country in the entire world. Sorry, I don't know the miles, but there's one person for every 2 square kilometers. I mean, it is that sparse. And so water, also being in the desert, is so precious. So there are these farmers who don't farm like vegetables or fruits, but they farm livestock. So they've got goats and cattle, which is basically their bank account. And that is, they will sell a cow every so many years, make a good amount of money that will sustain them for, I don't know, until they need to sell another cow. And so they need water for their cows and goats. And I mean, these people have nothing. There's no job out there. There's no industry. This is their entire livelihood. And so this organization I worked with called ERA, Elephant Human Relations Aid, they host these 2-week volunteer programs where volunteers come in and they work their asses off for a week to build these huge granite and cement walls around these water tanks to protect the water tanks from elephants from toppling them over and drinking all the water. And so then by keeping this water available to the farmers, it's like 6 different households of people and all their animals, this helps them coexist with wildlife. It's like it's a small, simple thing, but it is so necessary. And they've done great work, and it's actually made the people a little bit more tolerant of the elephants. So, I just got on such a tangent. But yeah, so basically what was your question? I was just talking about all the great conservation work I know that helps people with local communities deal with wildlife. It's just, okay, so you just have to think of ways, basically, always remember, if you want to help animals, you have to help people. That's it. You have to help the people.
That is a really good perspective. And I think, like in the film, it was a lot about like, let's punish the people for this illegal ivory trade, and it didn't talk much about the helping the people, which is such a good point. Yeah, and we have to come back to the burning of the tusks. But first, I want to mention, if there's anybody on the call that would like to submit a question, feel free to do so in the chat. I forgot to mention that at the beginning, I think, and I'm going off of some questions that were submitted beforehand. But the next question I wanted to ask you, Kate, which was submitted, is about zoos. It's very controversial. Zoos, they've sort of pivoted a little bit from, being a show and tell kind of space to being a more, active conservation and education platform for these things. I mean, do you feel like, you get elephants completely removed from their habitat into cities that, and places that would never have an elephant. Do you think that's an effective way to educate people about, elephants and about the ivory issue? Or do you think that, what are your thoughts about zoos? Everybody's always kind of curious to see how environmentalists feel about zoos.
Yeah, I love this question, and it's such a divisive topic, and people are so black and white with it. And I really think that it's somewhere in the middle. So prior to my doing proper safari guiding stuff and being out in the bush, when I was living in Los Angeles, I volunteered for 5-6 years at a wildlife sanctuary. So I worked with lions, tigers, bobcats, some bears. So I worked with big mammals in captivity, and I got to see how they dealt with it. And I've also done lots of research on other different species in captivity. And my answer is, truly, some species do really well in captivity and some species do not. And I don't think we can have a singular mindset and approach to no, end all zoos, they're all bad places. No, I think they've got such an important role in conservation and in creating a connection and empathy. Because that's what it is for me at the end of the day. It's somebody who can't afford to go to Africa and see a wild lion can go to a zoo with an animal who doesn't have, chain link over their enclosure, has a big grassy place where they can hide. But that kid can go to the zoo and see a lion and fall in love with them. So I think the way that we have to think of animals in captivity is as ambassadors of their species and treat them as such. I'm from DC. I see what the diplomats and ambassadors, I see what their houses look like. We should be doing that for the animals too. And so I think, again, some animals do well in captivity and some don't. I don't think elephants do well in captivity. We just can't give them what they need. Also, I think gorillas shouldn't be in captivity, orangutans. I do think it's a species specific thing. Orcas should not. Elephants are way too emotional. They walk too far every day. Their family bonds are very intense. I mean, there's a reason why you see Ellie's doing this all the time in captivity. They're just bored and they're depressed. So I think a great alternative to that, though, is using technology and using, again, education. Because, again, it's just trying to create empathy. I love the idea, and I think it's more effective to use really great VR goggles and videos to create that empathy for an animal. So for example, if you were to have a really great video of Ellie's in the wild and have people experience it with VR goggles, they're going to get closer than they ever would at a zoo to animals. They're going to see natural behavior. And then also, if you've ever been in the Oculus or whatever the other brands are, VR headsets, it feels so real, almost to the point where it's a little too intense. And I think that is such a great way to create empathy and connection. So that's my answer.
That's a great answer. I like hearing both sides of that. The pandas, not have a sort of a mixed history with captivity. But did you hear the story that Ying Ying, or whatever that panda's name was, got pregnant because finally the onlookers in the zoo were leaving, were gone because of the whole, COVID situation. So they finally got some privacy. So made me wonder, really, do we need to shut the zoos down for a couple weeks, every once in a while to let the animals have their space? And I've seen other videos where the animals like come out every day looking for the people that adore them, and there's nobody there, and then they get really sad. So yeah, I don't know, the zoo thing's kind of interesting. I think but speaking of I just wanted to mention of up close images of animals. Nicole, do you put Kate's website in the chat? Or maybe it was in the information that was sent out about this talk, because your photography with the animals that you've encountered is just stunning and is really amazing. And I think everybody would really enjoy that experience, seeing your work. I think we have time for a couple more questions. I don't see any questions in the chat. Do you tech people, Nicole, see any questions coming through chat, or should I just kind of keep going through the list of ones?
I don't see any in the chat right now. I'm gonna post that link though for her.
Okay, cool. So
an actual crime scene, so nobody's allowed to go there. They need to look for footsteps to see if they can find tracks. They got to look for shells of ammunition and like anything else that they can find that would lead them to find out who the poachers are. So it's like it's like a proper homicide crime scene.
Yeah, I noticed that when I saw that scene with the guy with the metal detector, I was like, who's looking for precious metal? And then I was like, oh, he's looking for bullets. And then there was the other scene where the guy's like, it doesn't have a copper casing, so it's poachers from another land. And I was like, oh my God, this is so much bigger than we realize. I mean, and like you said, all the people that put their lives on the line, you know, I mean, I really felt for the Chinese guy that, I feel terrible right now that I'm not remembering his name, the investigative journalist. I mean, it was just, I don't know, very moving film. And definitely looking forward to the next chance we get to talk to you, Kate, because I'm sure there's other films that you may recommend for Movie Club that we can chat about, because there's just so much on this topic. I don't see any other questions, so I think we'll wrap it up because we're pretty much out of time here. Thank you so much, Kate. Any last parting thoughts before we wrap up here?
Yes.
Okay, I knew it.
Subject to talk about all the time, please. Well, I just want to say that kind of, again, just leaving people with what you can do and how you can impact any of this, positively impact. I think the other thing is that we're realizing is, I mean, none of these situations are isolated. What happens in our own country as an American, the loss of habitat, loss of land also affects us on a much bigger interconnected scale as well. And so I would just urge people to push for and vote for legislation that protects wild areas that we still have left. And any little thing you can do, and your organization, Global Inheritance, is so great at it, with promoting being eco-friendly. And that, even if it doesn't feel like you're making a difference, it does. Try to use things that are reusable. Think about your choices, because you have a choice every moment of every day. You're making a choice, and once you're aware of what they are, you can make the better choice. So that's what I want to leave people with. And thank you so much for having me, and thank you guys for caring about animals and for caring about elephants. They're so amazing. I hope you all get to experience them in the wild one day. There's truly, truly nothing like them. So.
Yeah, I'm sad that I've aged out of your safari group by, a year and a half.
You can make an
but I might try to sneak in, do a little forgery on my passport. Yeah, and hopefully you can recommend a good movie about tigers, because I love talking about tigers with you. That's one of my favorite.
Tiger King.
Talk about you. Okay. Oh, I don't know about Tiger King, but maybe. Anyway, thank you, Kate. Really appreciate it. And thank you, everybody who joined us today. Hope that you guys had a good time and learned a little bit. I know I always learn a lot from Kate, and usually I get to spend, like 72 hours with her, trapped in a desert, but 45 minutes on the internet is good enough for now to sort of fun to do. And I'm glad you're back from Africa and you can join us, Kate. And thank you again for all your time and your expertise, and thank you for everything that you've done for the animals and for educating everybody that you've come in contact with. Just want to remind everybody the rules of Movie Club. The first rule: you talk about movie club. Second rule, you talk about movie club.
Movie club.
Yeah. Third rule, you watch incredible award-winning films and documentaries with friends. Well, or watch them, you know, by yourself, but then talk about them with your friends. And then the fourth rule, take trivia quizzes and participate in discussions. We will be announcing the quizzes each week via email and also the speakers, and you can also check the website. And the fifth rule, win incredible prizes. There's some great prizes coming up, which will also, don't forget, if you haven't signed up officially for Movie Club, please do. It's free to join. You can sign up on the globalinheritance.org website or at the link that maybe Nicole will put in the comments in the chat. And let's see, I think that's it. If you haven't taken the quiz yet, I think there's still time to do that. Stay safe, everybody, and keep your distance, but keep in touch. And it was a real pleasure. Thanks again, Kate. Always fun to hang out with you.